Hey folks, good evening and welcome to this special live stream regarding Governor Andrew Marks Cuomo's interview on the Brian Lehrer show this morning. But first, let's have a little transit update from Alexa. Please read my flash briefing.
Jason Anthony, here's your flash briefing. From the 123 delay update, southbound 1 train service is resuming with delays after we removed 2 trains with mechanical problems from service at 96th Street and at 116th Street, Columbia University. Please allow additional travel time in 1, 2, and 3 trains as we resume regular service. From the 456 service change, southbound 3 trains are running express from Atlantica of Barclays Center to Crown HTS Utica Alt because of FDNY activity at Nostrand off. Expect delays in 3, 4, and 5 train service. For service to /from bypass stations, consider using northbound 3 train service. From the 7 planned work, you may experience longer wait times, additional crowding and delays on 7 trains during this time. From the ACE delay update, trains are proceeding with delays in both directions after EMS assisted someone at Jamaica Center Parsons/Archer. From the BDFM planned work, DA trains start local service early as we move equipment into place for overnight planned work. Note, D trains skip 25 Street Prospect Ave, 4 Ave 9 Street and Union Ave in both directions beginning at 10:30 p.m. Jan 28 to 31. From the G, trains are running fine. From the JZ, trains are running fine. From the L, trains are running fine. From the NQRW, planned work, southbound 1 trains are running express from 96th Street to 72nd Street while we remove a train with mechanical problems from service at 96th Street. Expect delays in 1, 2, and 3 train service. From the shuttle, trains are running fine. From Staten Island, trains are running fine. From the streets, BM1 to BM5, BXM1 to BXM18, and QM1 to QM44 buses are running fine. There are detours on routes S40 to S98, SIM1 to SIM35, and X27 to X68. Be aware of service changes on BX1 to BX55, M1 to M116, and Q1 to Q113 buses. Routes B1 to B84 and B100 to B103 are running with delays. Please exit through the rear door from the Long Island Railroad, Babylon, Belmont, City Terminal Zone, Far Rockaway, Montauk, Port Washington, Ronkonkoma, and West Hempstead trains are running fine. Hempstead, Long Beach, Oyster Bay, and Port Jefferson trains are running with delays. Tickets please from the Metro North Railroad, Hudson, Harlem, Mosaic, New Haven, New Canaan, Danbury, and Waterbury trains are running fine. Pascack Valley and Port Jervis trains are running with delays. Tickets please from the bridges and tunnels, the Bronx Whitestone, Cross Bay, Henry Hudson, Hugh L. Carey, Marine Parkway, Queens Midtown, Flags Neck, and Verrazzano Narrows are all running fine. Be aware of service changes on the Robert F. Kennedy. Sunglasses off, lights on. From the Dickens Park Flatbush patch.
Alright, folks, there you have the Alexa mass transit update for tonight. And without any ado, let's go to what the governor said this morning on the Brian Lehrer show.
WNYC Studios is supported by the new play Nassim, now at City Center in its American premiere. This week's special guests include Michael Cerveris, Lisa Joyce, and Katie Finneran. No 2 performances are the same, and tickets are available at barrowstreettheater.com. WNYC Studios is supported by Brookfield Financial Properties. Arts Brookfield is bringing back the acclaimed silent film and live music series, curated by WNYC's John Schaefer, presenting The Kid on January 30th, Nosferatu on January 31st, and Underworld on February 1st, 7:30 p.m. at the Winter Garden at Brookfield Place.
Lehrer on WNYC, and Governor Cuomo joins us now.
having made news on several fronts in the last day. He signed a bill passed by the new Democrat-controlled legislature to codify Roe versus Wade into New York state law, just in case a certain new Supreme Court justice who really likes beer tips the balance and throws out constitutional abortion rights protection at the federal level. When Republicans controlled the state Senate, that bill couldn't get through. The governor also seems to be lobbying against an MTA fare increase this year, which the MTA board is scheduled to vote on tomorrow. But will depriving them of that revenue be good or bad for service? We'll talk about those things and more. Thanks for joining us, Governor. Welcome back to WNYC.
Good to be with you, Brian.
And let's start with the Reproductive Health Act. Does it matter while Roe is still in effect?
It matters greatly. And by the way, only you could get away with that line, who likes to drink beer. If I had said that, the rest of the day you would be shot.
It's a very specific identifying characteristic.
New York State is in a very interesting position right now. We've always been the progressive leader in this nation. And the juxtaposition between our philosophy of government and society and the federal government's actions couldn't be clearer. So you're right. They're appointing a Supreme Court. I would say this is a president who is packing the Supreme Court to deliver on his ultra-conservative agenda. And New York is the juxtaposition. They're talking about reversing Roe v. Wade. Yesterday was the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, 46 years. We had Sarah Weddington here, who was the woman who argued Roe v. Wade, 26 years old when she argued it. And they would take us back before Roe v. Wade. We did the exact opposite. We passed a law codifying Roe v. Wade into the state law, and I'm asking for a constitutional amendment to add it to our Constitution because I'm afraid of future pendulum swings.
Yes. You said packing the court. A liberal president, Democratic president will put constitutionally liberal justices on the court. A Republican president will put constitutionally conservative justices on the court. Is there a moral distinction?
There is a moral distinction. Every administration in the past that was credible would say they're putting jurists on the court who are there to first apply the Constitution to the facts. I think if you listen to this president, he says he's putting people on the court who will first apply his ideological conservative beliefs. This is a president who asked the conservative accreditation society, in essence, give me a list of 25 judges who you deem good conservatives, and I will select from them. Rolling back Roe v. Wade, just think about it for a moment, Brian. It's 46 years. Society is about going forward and learning and progress. This president and this administration has this recurring theme of they're going to take us back to the good old days.
But I think Hillary Clinton ran, and I don't want to get too stuck on this point because we have other things to talk about, but I think Hillary Clinton basically promised when she was running to appoint justices who would preserve Roe. If you were president, would you not kind of make that promise to the American people?
Well, preserving Roe is the obvious path for a jurist who is guided by precedents, who is not going to seek to return us to a decision we made 46 years ago, and which, by the way, has been reaffirmed by the court twice since then, 1992 and 2016. Saying I'm not going to appoint judges who would roll back women's rights 50 years, I think is a fairly obvious position to take. And look, it's not just Roe v. Wade. They want to roll back gun safety laws. This state, I passed the most aggressive gun safety laws in the United States. This is a president who says, I believe in the strict interpretation of the Second Amendment. You see them now challenging the New York City gun law case. And New York is going to say, we're passing even more aggressive gun safety laws, what we call the red flag law, extending the waiting period, banning bump stocks. When we passed the SAFE Act, After the Sandy Hook crisis in Connecticut, the massacre, it was the most aggressive law in the nation, Brian, and I took a tremendous political beating by people who said, well, I'm overreacting to a once-in-a-lifetime situation, a school shooting. That was Sandy Hook, Connecticut. It has happened over and over and over again since then.
So do you have a position on this? For people who don't know, the Supreme Court agreed yesterday to review a law here in New York that prevents New York City gun permit holders from taking their guns upstate. Do you support that law?
I support the city's law. This is look, the president is nothing if not obvious. He's as obvious as a wall. He says he believes these gun laws are violating the Second Amendment, and then his court turns around and says we're now going to challenge the New York City law. New York State is going to turn around and say, oh, really? Well, we're passing an even stricter gun safety law because we believe something has to be done about the massacres. So these are very clear juxtapositions, and I want this state to lead, and I want this nation to see there are alternative directions. It doesn't have to be about going backwards. You can go forwards. You can go forwards on women's equality, where we now have the most aggressive women's equality agenda in the United States of America. We can have the strictest gun safety law, and legal owners who are not mentally ill can still use guns, and sportsmen, etc. It does not have to be these extreme positions.
But the particular arguments of the New Yorkers who are the plaintiffs in this case say, we are licensed gun owners who live in New York City. All we want to do is, in one case, take our guns to my second home upstate, and in the other case, go upstate with my licensed firearm to hunt. Why not?
They have, New York City localities have the right to reasonable regulation of guns. And New York City, you have one of the most dense populations in the country. You have a real problem with violence and guns to begin with, and they came up with strict laws, and I believe they should have that right.
I'm going to play a soundbite getting back to the Reproductive Health Act of Republican Assemblywoman Nicole Maliotakis from Staten Island, who voted against the bill. She argues in this 17-second clip that it contains things that are dangerous that go beyond simply codifying Roe.
Those who actually read the bill can see that it's not simply codifying Roe v. Wade. In fact, it removes the requirement that a doctor be present. It removes all criminal negligence if a woman loses her baby as a result of assault, and it allows abortion into the third trimester for really any reason.
So will you defend those particular provisions of the bill if you agree that she characterized them accurately?
I don't agree that she's characterized them accurately. There's a medical professional who is involved in procedures.
But not necessarily a doctor, whereas under the old law, a doctor was required. Is that it?
Yeah, well, the old law, it had criminal penalties. The old law was in the penal code, and it was written around that a woman or a doctor could be criminally liable. That was the main revision in the law. Beyond that, it is wholly consistent with the federal Roe law, and it codifies it into state law. The quote-unquote late-term abortion argument, this has always been the red herring in the argument. You're talking about the health and safety of a mother. It's rare, and it is about the health and safety of a mother, and it's always been the point where the conservatives wave the flag. They want to roll back Roe v. Wade. This is not gray here. It's black and white. Guns, Roe v. Wade, transgender rights. You just saw the Supreme Court uphold the military ban on transgender. We're going the exact opposite way and signing the gender law that says you can't discriminate against transgender people. So these are 180-degree differences. and I'm proud of them.
And so you are siding with the Nurses Association, I guess, I don't know which particular group, but the highest level of trained nurses who I guess would now be licensable to perform abortions if they're specifically trained for that in New York State, correct?
I don't know the nurse's position specifically, Brian, but this law reflects what it is, both federal law and current practice in this state.
Another priority, and if you're just joining us, listeners, my guest is Governor Cuomo. Another priority with the new politics of the legislature is tenant protections in gentrifying New York, and it's certainly something you brought up in your State of the State address and your agenda rollout last month. One element that you didn't mention that many Democratic legislators and tenants groups have called for is ending the vacancy bonus that lets landlords boost rents by 20% once a rent stabilized unit is vacant. What's your position on that?
Yeah, I think I did talk about it. I said a lot of things, so
forgive me if I missed
a couple of words, but we talked about ending vacancy decontrol. We talked about the major capital improvement abuses, preferential rent. There is no doubt that the rent laws are out of date. And we fought this fight for many years, and it was stopped by a Republican Senate. And now we can make progress. The reason you see all the energy and excitement now is many of these bills have been bottled up for years. Brian, going back to the Reproductive Health Act quickly that we signed yesterday, Andrea Stewart-Cousins has been carrying that bill. She's now the Senate leader, but she was carrying it as a senator 12 years ago. I called one of my daughters yesterday and I said, I'm all excited. We passed the Reproductive Health Act. And she said, I thought you were supposed to do that 8 years ago, Dad. Which is true. I've been proposing it from the first time I entered office. So many of these items we have pushed, we have proposed, we've argued, we fought, we were stymied, and now you see the break in the dam and you see the energy, on the rent laws.
On so many things. But there's a difference between what's usually called vacancy decontrol, which is usually when a tenant moves out, a landlord can do a certain amount of renovations and then put it onto the market for market rates. The particular thing that some people are wondering about is another related agenda item where when it becomes vacant, even if it stays in the rent stabilization system, under rent stabilized tenant. Some lawmakers want to do away with that. What's your position?
Yeah, well, that we have to go through the details of the bill and see how they all interrelate because many of these are interconnected, right? And we have to negotiate the whole new rent law as a package, but there's no doubt that it needs significant reform all across the board.
So that's open to negotiation. And also on that, rent stabilization only applies to New York City and some of the adjacent areas, but some people are calling for expanding it statewide to preserve affordable housing and fight homelessness. Where do you stand on any kind of statewide rent stabilization or rent control, or call it what you will?
You know, that again is something that we would have to work through, Brian. How does it affect the other markets? I'd have to study that because I'm not sure myself. But if it's a positive change, I'm open to anything. Obviously, you know, I was the Housing and Urban Development Secretary. I worked my whole life in housing and homelessness, starting in my 20s. So, the more affordable housing, the more tenant protections, the better. We have in our budget this year the highest state investment in history in affordable housing, $20 billion. So it's a critical need, and it's something we need to address this year.
All right, let's talk about the MTA. The vote on a fair hike is scheduled for tomorrow, as I understand it, at the MTA board. You control a plurality of the members. Are you instructing them to vote no?
I control, quote unquote, to the extent anyone controls a person who's appointed, 6 out of 17. The problem with the MTA is
that's just for the record. That's a plurality, right?
Well, if you say whoever you appoint, you control. I think if you were talking to Fernando Ferrer, he would say I'm not a puppet. But we can leave that argument somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And the problem with the MTA is multifaceted. They do have a financial issue. They need a long-term capital funding stream especially, and I've suggested congestion pricing, and I don't believe there's a viable alternative, and I'm going to push that very hard because we also have to reduce congestion in Manhattan. We've been denying this problem for many, many years, and there's no secret why we have 50-year-old subway cars and they break down. We haven't been investing. We have to invest. There's a second problem, which is the management of the MTA. That is an ongoing, consistent problem. The MTA was set up in the 60s. It is accountable to no one because there is no elected official who wanted to go near it. So it's part me, part the mayor, it's part the speaker, it's part the Senate leader, means it's no one. Someone has to be accountable. It has to be better managed. A bureaucracy, unmanaged and unaccountable, builds bureaucracy. That is the MTA. It's the New York City Housing Authority. And there is no change without disruption. And insanity is just doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Judge Pauley, who I believe deserves an award for public service, who's the federal judge who came in and said on the New York City Housing Authority, I'm not signing off on an agreement that doesn't really change the status quo. It comes with disruption. The bureaucracy of the MTA is not working as well as it should, and no one is accountable. That we could have gone through this situation on the L train where they were going to close down a tunnel for 15 months, disrupt 250,000 people, traffic all across the city, and no one really pushed to see if there was an alternative or a better design.
So I know you want to change the structure of the MTA, and that's one big conversation to have. But in the meantime, on the fare hike, everyone, including you, is trying to get more money to the MTA in various ways. You mentioned congestion pricing to improve service and do the big fix. Now you want to deny it some additional funds. So is this good or bad for riders?
What is good for riders is a functional organization. Money alone solves nothing. Period. Just throwing more money into the tracks is not going to make a difference without the management reform. And the management reform is difficult. It's politically difficult. No politician really wants to take responsibility. And that's what we need to address first or at the same time. I'm in favor of more revenue. I'm proposing congestion pricing. It's $1 billion a year. I get the need for the funding. I also get the need that the bureaucracy is not working. We all know that. You put a microphone in any rider's face and they'll say, I want service to be better. Well, is that more money?
So
maybe that's part of it, but we need better management and real management.
So here's a thought. Instead of tying the fare hike to quality of service when the system needs funding, why not the MTA executive pay to service so the people failing the riders feel the pinch rather than operations feeling the pinch?
Well, first of all, they're one in the same. But if what you're saying is let's have a performance-based management, yeah, fine. Let's start with, by the way, someone should be in charge. And by the way, you have a number of options. You now have the MTA. There's no MTA. It's New York City Subways, New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, Metro North. There are three entities. You want to break it up into three and say Long Island Railroad is one thing and Metro North is one thing and New York City is another thing and the mayor is in charge of the subway system and the county executives are in charge or share authority. Just come up with accountability. There is no concept of a bureaucracy that runs itself when no one is in charge.
So
we want to change the situation in the New York City Public Housing Authority. Do something different. Have someone in charge. You have a federal government that is running away from it because they want to have nothing to do with it, because this federal administration, frankly, doesn't care about the state of public housing. To say the same system is going to render a different result is a fool's errand. And let's be frank, Brian, and let's understand there is no change without disruption. And at one point, people have suffered enough, and riders have suffered enough.
Can the MTA board at tomorrow's meeting revise its own structure and tie it to a fare hike, or does that have to be done by the legislature or some other way?
Well, first of all, it's my position I've made totally clear. Whether or not my appointees, who are credible, independent people, follow it, I don't know. But then you have the mayor's appointees who would have to vote, and you have the different county executives appointees who would have to vote. Some are Republican holdovers, some are Democratic holdovers. I mean, there's more politics on that board than you have going on in Washington, D.C. around the shutdown. It is wholly dysfunctional. It is political. And it was set up to be such. If you go back and read the history of the MTA when they set it up, Nelson Rockefeller didn't want to be anywhere near it, and the mayors didn't want to be anywhere near it. So they made it this multi-headed monster, and now we're paying the price. What? And if I'm going to look at the people of the state and say it will get better, I have to believe it will get better. And I don't believe it will get better with just money. You need accountability, and you need a management structure.
One more MTA-related thing. Your appointee and close aide Larry Schwartz is quoted saying they also need to deal with fare evasion. And I'm sure you know that the New York City Transit President, Andy Byford, and Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, have been at odds on sort of criminal justice reform away from small violations versus the importance of paying the fare. Do you have a side on that?
I don't have a side, but if you want to talk about raising fares, the first point should be, do people have to pay them, or is it a voluntary payment system? You can either pay the fare or you can walk through the door. Right? It's analogous to the wall situation on the borders, you know. Are you going to have entrances, or it's just so on the subway? Do you have to pay the fare, or do you not have to pay the fare? Can you just walk through the door? Because the number of fare evasions has gone up dramatically. Now, politically, I understand the argument. Well, these are people who can't afford it. Sometimes they're young people. Do you really want to give them a record? Do you really want to burden the court system? I get the politics, but let's talk reality. Fare evasion is a growing problem. And it shouldn't be that a DA has a position and therefore the MTA is bound by it. Resolve it. Well, who's going to resolve it? Nobody. Nobody's going to resolve it because nobody's in charge. Should the mayor resolve it? Should the governor resolve it? You know, and that is the recurring problem over and over again. There can be, I'll give you a list of issues. I went through this with the L train. Who was supposed to ask the question, is there a better plan? Freddie Ferrer, Larry Schwartz, Polly Trottenberg, who is the commissioner of the City Department of Transportation, sat on the board, spent years designing an alternative traffic plan. Why didn't anyone ask and really scrutinize? Is this the best plan? There's a bureaucracy there that is institutionalized. They deal with the same vendors, the same contractors. It's unquestioned, and it is the permanent government, as Jack Newfield, God rest his soul, used to talk about.
We have about 3 minutes left. Let me see if I can get two quick things in. One on Amazon. Our next segment is going to be with the editor of City Limits magazine, who has looked into what Amazon's political agenda has been beyond the tax subsidies. And one of the things that they apparently did in Seattle was help to kill a tax hike that has had an impact, people say, on gentrification there and homelessness there, such that Microsoft, which is also in that area, has now contributed $500 million to help fight homelessness. Amazon here put a cryptic clause in the agreement, according to this report, saying that the city and the state will back laws that foster innovation. Do you understand the innovation clause, and are you afraid Amazon will work against progressive tax policies?
I don't know what Amazon's politics are. I wasn't aware of that clause about innovation, but I don't know who could be against innovation. No, I'm against any innovation. So that clause, from just your reading of it, doesn't bother me. I don't know what their political agenda is, and I don't support it or necessarily oppose it. I don't know what their politics are, and frankly, I don't care what their politics are. Okay. They're bringing revenue to the state, they're bringing revenue to the city, they're bringing good jobs, and it's a good investment.
Apparently in Seattle, Microsoft felt the need to help bail the city out from increasing homelessness since Amazon arrived with this $500 million donation. Are you afraid that'll happen here?
Well, I don't know what they did in Seattle. If they do something, if Amazon took a political position that was contrary to anything in the city interest or the state interest, I would fight them with every fiber of my being. And we're going to get billions in revenue from Amazon to do all sorts of good things, affordable housing, job training, etc. And we're getting 25,000 jobs. So, the only transaction is they come here, we make a lot of money in revenue, and they bring 25,000 jobs. Any position they hold beyond that, that's going to be their business. And if there's going to be a fight, there'll be a fight another day. But I'm not aware of any political agenda they have. You read the clause on innovation. Mm-hmm. If that's all it is, yes, I'm in favor of innovation.
And in our next segment, listeners, we're going to explain the clause on innovation and see what its implications might be. Last thing, you mentioned NYCHA and its dysfunctional structure. There's a January 31st deadline, which the government shutdown might cause a delay in, but at the moment it's January 31st from the federal court for the city to say why the federal government itself should take over NYCHA and run it. Do you have any sympathy to that scenario if the city's own NYCHA is not doing the job? Maybe they'd be better off if the court took it over and then, oh my God, we've caught the car, if you know what I mean.
Look, I think NYCHA is different than the MTA in a significant regard. New York City controls unilaterally the board that is NYCHA. They run it basically as an agent for the federal government. I'm the former HUD secretary, Housing and Urban Development. So I went through this a number of times. I think Judge Pauly is exactly right. And what Judge Pauly said when they came to him with the first agreement, which was a surprising stance, a federal judge often rubber stamps whatever was worked out by the federal government. This federal judge, Pauly, actually said it doesn't make any sense. And he said, I'm not going to approve a plan, in essence, unless I believe there's a likelihood of change. And I get the political forces. The federal government doesn't want to go near this, Brian. Just like they don't want to take over the Public Housing Authority, just like no elected official wanted responsibility for the trains and the MTA. They want to stay 100 miles away from it. They don't believe in it ideologically, etc. The NYCHA board is saying, well, we'll do things differently. And the judge is saying, well, why would I believe that you would do things differently than you've done them in the past? Give me some evidence of change.
Do you see enough evidence of change?
I haven't gone through the agreement with the specificity that the judge has, but I applaud the judge for saying, look, you're endangering human lives in this situation. And it's every day. And I'm not going to be part of a history that said I signed off on an agreement that didn't accomplish anything and then has us right back in the same place 5 years from now. That's why people get disgusted with government. That's why people think these progressive policies don't work. I want to be part of a real solution.
So,
Good for you, Judge Pauly. I want to do the same thing on the MTA.
So you're open in our last 20 seconds to Judge Pauly saying, nope, that's it. What you've submitted, Mayor de Blasio, is not good enough. The court is now going to oversee NYCHA.
I don't know that the judge wants to go in the housing management business. I don't think that's what the judge is saying. The judge is saying, I want a system that has a likelihood of success. And what is going to be different? Just don't tell me tomorrow is a different day and therefore the result will be different. Unless you make changes that are significant, there is no reasonable belief that the situation is going to change. And these nameless, faceless bureaucracies that have failed to perform, they have an entrenched culture and mentality, and it is very, very hard to change them. I've done it on the federal level, I've done it on the state level, and the first step is admitting the problem and how deep it is and having the guts to say this has to change. That's the first step, and that's what Judge Pauly did, and I applaud him, and I hope he holds firm and he does not approve a plan unless he believes it's going to improve lives for those 400,000 people who are suffering.
Governor Andrew Cuomo, thanks as always. Talk to you next time.
Thank you.
All right, folks, there you have it. Governor Andrew Mark Cuomo on his appearance once again on the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. So, bottom line, should the MTA be reformed? Should the county executive control Metro North and Long Island Railroad? We will be posting this poll shortly on my Twitter page. Please go to twitter.com/JasonBXNY0619. We will be posting two things. One, are you in favor or against having a reform on the MTA? In other words, dismantling the actual bureaucracy and creating a new MTA. And second, should the county executives be in charge of Metro North and Long Island Railroad? And let's see the fave tomorrow morning regarding the fare and toll increases. So that being said, thank you for joining us. And remember a couple of things tomorrow. One, the regular edition of Jason's Discharge this time will be in English and in Spanish. And at the same time, we're going to debut our both live stream and podcast of Jason's Discharge in Spanish. Because we want to be that voice for the Latino community in New York City. So please tune in tomorrow around 9 a.m. We'll be live from MTA headquarters at 2 Broadway in Lower Manhattan, as usual. And let's see the fate of the fare and toll increases. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys tomorrow morning.